Stepmom framed me for stealing stepsis's college savings. My dad called me a desperate lowlife and kicked me out. 8 years later, he realized stepmom's true colors and asked me to fulfill my duty as his daughter. I laughed at his face. Imagine being called a desperate lowlife by your own father. Well, this is my stepmother's doing because she absolutely lied and said I stole my stepsister's college fund. I haven't even stolen a piece of bubblegum in my entire life. So, you know what? I'm going to do something kind of crazy. When my dad comes crawling back to me after he realizes the truth, I'm not going to say anything to him. I'm just going to walk away. My dad is trying to get back in contact with me after years of no contact, and I don't know how I feel about it. I haven't seen him since I was 16, and we haven't spoken since I was 17, when we both attended my grandmother's funeral. I'd say that was less of a conversation and more him trying to get away from me when my aunt tried to get us to talk to each other. We never had a particularly close relationship, even when I was young. In fact, for most of my childhood, we did not have any relationship at all. He walked out on my mom shortly after I was born and never looked back. To be perfectly honest, I didn't really care. I didn't know anything about him other than his name, and I would have gladly kept it that way for the rest of my life. Obviously, considering that I do know him, that didn't work out. When I was 13, my mother passed away, and with nowhere else to go, I ended up with him. It wasn't like he chose to take me in, he legally had to, and I was miserable for it. By the time I was thrust back into his life, he had already moved on. He was remarried to a woman who had her own daughter a couple of years older than me, and they didn't even know I existed until I was literally moving in with them. It was not a pleasant adjustment, as you can imagine, moving in with 3 strangers, one of whom had decided he didn't want you before you could even talk, and the remaining 2 not even knowing of your existence. Part of the legal requirements of me moving in involved having my own bedroom, which would have been fine since they lived in a 3-bedroom townhouse, except my stepmom and stepsister had converted the spare room into a decked-out dressing room/walk-in closet. Me moving in meant they lost that, which was not a great note to start on with first impressions in mind. All things considered, my stepsister, whom I'll be referring to as Sally for simplicity, was actually pretty okay. I mean, don't get me wrong, she wasn't some perfect older sister with whom I immediately connected and formed a deep sisterly bond. We were not close. I wouldn't even say that we were friends, really, but we tolerated one another. Occasionally, we allowed the other to borrow a pair of jeans or maybe even a pair of earrings, stuff like that. We didn't really talk otherwise. To be honest, my stepmother was a very different case. She did not like me, don't get me wrong, I don't think Sally did either, but her mother could not stand me from the moment I set foot in the house. I guess she saw me as some horrible tie to my dad's past and a constant reminder of his first wife. So, I did my best to stay away from her. She especially hated it when I borrowed anything from Sally, so I eventually just stopped and tried not to get in her way. Then, when I was 16, she accused me of stealing Sally's college fund. It was an absolute mess. I mean, I was actually 16. I came home from school one day to find Sally sobbing in the living room, my stepmother trying to console her, and Dad just pacing in front of them. The moment I walked in, my dad and stepmom blew up, accusing me of stealing the money my stepmom had saved to cover Sally's college tuition because I was a horrible, jealous child who could not accept that Sally was allowed to have things that I couldn't. According to her, she noticed that her debit card was missing earlier that day and had been looking for it everywhere. When she couldn't find it, she decided to call her bank. They told her that the accounts had been completely drained over the last few months, and I was the only one who would have had access to her purse and the debit card. I vehemently denied everything. I want to make it clear for the sake of this post, I did not take her money. What would I have done with it at that age? Where would I have put the money? When would I have had the time to withdraw it, let alone spend it? It didn't matter what I said at that point, though, they'd already decided that I'd taken it. My stepmother especially went on and on about how horrible it was of me to steal from them, to steal from my own stepsister. They told me that I had 1 week to return the money, or they'd have no choice but to kick me out. They wouldn't have a thief living under their roof. I spent that week begging my father to believe me. I hadn't done it, she was lying. I didn't know why, and I still don't know why, but she was lying. Before the week was up, my stepmother found an ATM receipt in my bedroom. They gave me one last chance to fess up and give them the money that she claimed I'd stolen. When I didn't, because I couldn't, my own father kicked me out of the house, saying that he didn't know how to live with the fact that his daughter was a desperate lowlife who would steal from people who took her in. I was 16. I didn't know what to do, so I just walked until I reached my school. I sat there until I finally calmed down enough to call the only person I could think of calling at that time. Now you can watch the second part by pressing share and more.